shiny pennant. And then there is the advertising campaign that Gordon works on after his return to the agency, a remedy for sweaty feet rammed home by the slogan PP, pedic perspiration. What about you? If this is thought to possess a sinister simplicity, then it also seems that a step or two away from the looming terrors of Big Brother and the thought police. These twitchers on the thread are never more insistent than in Orwell's sorrowings over the Golden Country, the idea of a rural idyll to which the hero can escape, usually accompanied by a woman, and forget the cares that assail him for an hour or two. Old friends noted his tendency to let himself go when he attempted to link his love of nature with his love of women. In 1984, this finds expression in a passage in Chapter 3 in which Winston lies dreaming of his early life and the tragedy of his mother's death. Suddenly he was standing on short, springy turf on a summer evening when the slanting rays of the sun gilded the ground. The landscape that he was looking at recurred so often in his dreams that he was never fully certain whether or not he had seen it in the real world. In his waking thoughts he called it the Golden Country. It was an old rabbit-bitten pasture, with a foot track wandering across it and a molehill here and there. In the ragged hedge on the opposite side of the field, the boughs of the elm trees were swaying very faintly in the breeze, their leaves just stirring in dense masses like women's hair. Somewhere near at hand, though out of sight, there was a clear, slow-moving stream where dace were swimming in the pools under the willow trees. Summer pasture and gilded ground, the thought of rabbits, moles, and dace swimming in their pools, leaves stirring like women's hair. It is an intensely realized passage, born out of a deep longing for the reflective, slow-moving rural life that Orwell had relished as a child, and paragraphs like it strewn all over his early work. In Burmese days, Florey and Elizabeth amble side by side across a stubble field. The sun was going down beyond the Irrawaddy. The light shone yellow across the field, gilding the stubble stalks and striking into their faces with a yellow, gentle beam. There are the same atmospherics, the declining sun, the springy ground, and, significantly, even some of the same figurative effects. A very similar scene occurs in Keep the Aspidistra Flying, where Gordon and Rosemary make a weekend trip to Burnham Beeches, 20 miles outside London, where once again the sunshine floods the fields and the glimpse of a rabbit leaping up from its burrow sends them into raptures. Bowling, meanwhile, is the Golden Country's very own resident game warden, a 45-year-old insurance salesman fixated, like his creator, on the world of his Edwardian childhood, forever dreaming of the long rambling walks he took through the Oxfordshire verdure and the pools of giant carp just waiting for some intrepid fisherman to lay them waste. If all Orwell's pre-1939 characters are in some sense coming up for air, surfacing for a brief gasp of freedom before the water closes once more over their heads, then the account of George Bowling's attempt to rediscover some of the territory of his lost past is 1984's most obvious dry run. A veteran of the conflict of 1914-18, monitoring the news from continental Europe with an increasingly anxious glance, Bowling is less agitated by the prospect of a Second World War, it's coming soon, that's certain, than by the future that stretches out beyond it. But it isn't the war that matters, it's the after-war. The world we're going down into, the kind of hate world, slogan world, the coloured shirts, the barbed wire, the rubber truncheons, the secret cells where the electric light burns night and day, and the detectives watching you while you sleep, and the processions and the posters with enormous faces, and the crowds of 1 million people all cheering for the leader until they deafen themselves into thinking that they really worship him. And all the time underneath, they hate him so that they want to puke. It's all going to happen. Written late in 1938 or early in 1939, this is, on the most basic level, a response to the newsreel pictures of Hitler and Stalin, but is also uncannily prefigurative of the world of Big Brother, 2 Minutes Hate, and the torture chambers of the Ministry of Love, Orwell busily extrapolating the landscapes of interwar-era England into a future that he fears Hitler and Stalin will have helped to create. Coming Up for Air extends to more than one revelation of this kind, all the more pointed in that they tend to be framed in the context of Bowling's nostalgia. Quite early on in the novel, he stops an elegiac recitation of the principal British coarse fish, roach, rudd, dace, bleak, barbel, to reflect these are solid kind of names. The people who made them up hadn't heard of machine guns. They didn't live in terror of the sack or spend their time eating aspirins, going to the pictures, and wondering how to keep out of the concentration camp. The reflections about the after-war steal into Bowling's head as he sits at a meeting of the West Bletchley Left Book Club listening to a lecture on the menace of fascism.